at the microphone, and my guest today is Senior Barrister Akere. As you know, he is an international lawyer and also an international consultant and governance expert. Together with Senior Barrister Akere, we are going to be examining issues affecting our continent, Africa, and of course, beginning from his home country, Cameroon. Senior Barrister Akere, we want to thank you so much on my Media Prime for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be part of this program.
Well, I thank you very much for inviting me, and I must congratulate you for the amazing work. This is a confirmation of the ingenuity of Cameroonians and their talent, so I'm very honored to be your guest.
Thank you, Senior Barrister Akere. Of course, today we are going to be looking at the issues affecting your beloved country, Cameroon. Then from there, we are going to talk about corruption, because you are also a member of the panel on illicit financial flows.
That's correct, yes.
And of course, we'll talk about the DR Congo, where you are advisor to President Felix Tshisekedi, as well as your views on issues affecting our continent, Africa. But before then, Senior Barrister, today we are celebrating Youth Day in Cameroon, and you got the speech of the President of the Republic of Cameroon, Paul Biya. Do you think this speech of President Paul Biya addressed challenges or issues, current issues in the country?
Before I answer that question directly, I think it's always important to remind ourselves that there is an International Youth Day, which is the 12th of August, voted by the UN General Assembly in 1999, and it started celebrating, I think, in 2020. So there is an International Youth Day. And I think it's important each time we celebrate the 11th of February to remind people that it's the date of the plebiscite. It is on this date that Southern Cameroonians voted to reunite. That's the importance of the message. And even for those who clamor about one and not divisible, it's important to remind people of this phenomenon. So the Youth Day, okay, it's possible that August is the middle of vacation and you might not be able to engage the youth in their numbers, so we'll move it to another date, but it's always important to remind the youth of the historical nature of the 11th of February. Now, the International Youth Day is something else, which we never mention in our country. That being said, I think those who observe the head of state is that there's a template so far which he uses for these messages. And those who go to listen to it waiting for something extraordinary always leave disappointed. So I listened to it expecting nothing, and I came away from it without anything, because he's already set the tone of the nature of this speech. So I really think that there's nothing I can say more than that about the speech.
Senior Barrister, you are in Cameroon at the time when Cameroonians, especially the journalism profession, they are bereaved after losing 2 journalists within a period of 1 month. And the most popular is Martinez Zogo, who was assassinated. Of course, we are waiting for the judiciary to confirm whether it was a murder or it was an assassination. But he was killed in the most inhuman ways. I saw that you paid a visit to the family of Amplitude FM, his professional family. Would like to know from you, Senior Barrister, what is the impact of this kind of incident on the image of Cameroon?
Well, it happened when I was out of the country, and I can therefore tell you that the impact was disastrous. I personally got upwards from 20 calls from UK, from the US, from Italy, from some friends in East Africa and Southern Africa who wanted to find out what the hell is going on. So the impact is, it doesn't honor our country at all. That being said, I think that people's lives are taken for interest. It's so, well, you come until you expect it. Those in the Northwest and Southwest have seen this kind of murderous, it's kind of inhuman treatment. But the thing that strikes one about Zogo is the fact that the level of inhumanity and brutality that was used, which is very akin to what the mafias, the mafiosos do, gives the impression that beyond punishing him, there was the need to use it as a deterrent towards other journalists. And those who did this made a big error, because there are two groups you shouldn't touch in such a way: lawyers and journalists, because we are part of a global fraternity, and it's like sting one, sting all. And the way the murder of Martinez was perceived abroad, every journalist felt affected. So I think those who did this was a stupid miscalculation. It reminds me of the early 90s, when the most repressive law on the bar was passed by the parliament. There was an uproar all over the world from international organizations of lawyers. And that is the only law in the history of our country which was passed as a bill in parliament, and President Biya refused to promulgate.
Senior Barrister, the President of the Republic, Paul Biya, has ordered investigations. Of course, last night during the speech on the 10th of February, many expected the President of the Republic to personally address the issue, but he had already addressed the issue through a letter from the Secretary General of the Presidency, Minister of State Ferdinand Gongo. We've seen arrests of some people that were considered as untouchable, with regime supporters were considered as untouchable, have been picked up, and we see that the investigations are going on. Can you say that it's an opportunity to laud this action by the head of state?
Well, you know, from the point of view that we are made to understand that the head of state is listening. But on the other hand, I think that the sentiment of distraught and sadness and bewilderment for such an incident, the fact that there's a family, there's a woman who is widowed, the children who are now orphaned, that sentiment to me surpasses any need to jubilate because they're ordering an investigation. An investigation, there should be, and there must be, and there should always be. The fact that, for political reasons, this investigation is cast in a different light, to me, it's good, but I don't think that to go all the way saying that, you know, I hear people like sending messages of thanks and congratulations, which is, again, this cheerleaders like in Motion de Soutien and stuff like that who do this. But I think that some of these matters should not be ridiculed by all this folklore that people try to add on to it. The fact remains that I think there should be transparent, clear information, i.e. somebody should come out, not the Minister of Communication or somebody else, somebody linked with the investigation who comes out to a podium and says, listen, I am leading this investigation ordered by the head of state. It's a mixed investigation. We are X amount of us police, X amount of us the gendarmes. We are looking at this. This is the person presiding this commission, and we have arrested some people who are helping the police with the investigation, and we are continuing our investigation. We are investigating A, B, C, D, and E. Please, we shall give you information as time goes on, and we ask people to refrain from just floating rumors as the truth. But since they don't speak, you go on the internet, there are 50 different theories and lobbies for and against, which is sad.
Which means that you decry the fact that Cameroonians getting informed about what is happening in their country through alerts from activists who are out of the country.
Exactly, it's sad because
what does that say about the nation, that to get informed about issues?
I think this country thrives a lot on opacity, okay, and that's a sad fact. Governance, good governance, depends on transparency, and in this country we just feel that everything should be hidden. You know, there's a law of 2018. I keep reminding people, which says it's about transparency and governance. It says, I think in Article 48 or 49, that journalists are encouraged to drive the debate on the issue of management of public finance. A positive engagement. And that is what Martinez was doing. So this manner of always keeping things secret is sad, you know, and it can embarrass the government. Look at the case of Oleme. We're told that the stadium is very ready for the cup and everything is good and ready. Boom, what happens afterwards? We have a letter saying that there are about 32 reserved, that the stadium is not finished. So I think all this, you know, nothing is said, you know, it is sad, and that's what we are. We're going to be a victim of this constantly and persistently.
Senior Barrister, what are your suggestions towards a free and vibrant press in Cameroon? Just of recent, we heard that the usual aid or support to the media has been reduced to 56 million. And you know we are at a moment where the media will need the support of the state to be able to cope based on the work they are doing for the nation. Now, journalists could maybe find themselves being caught up, lured to be political targets because they are working in camps. What are your suggestions to the government? What can they do to ensure a free and a vibrant press in Cameroon?
Well, government will firstly have to accept the media as a partner. If it does, it will realize, therefore, it has to support the partner. All international conventions, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, I'll just to mention a few, the African Union Convention on Preventing and Fighting Corruption, request that the media be associated to the execution and implementation of those conventions, which means that these are partners. And this is reflected in the law I just mentioned earlier, which invites the press to go ahead and, you know, promote the discourse on the use of public finances. And if the government views the media as an adversary, therefore you go ahead and provide token assistance until the government openly accepts the media as a partner. Then, of course, I even think that the role of the government in the media should be rather reduced. You know, the autonomy of all the media outlets which are run by the government should be more pronounced, and that's what I think it is. And until we get to the point where the media is really a partner, accepted and so proclaimed, we will always have this tendency for people to have their own newspaper, their own TV station, and that in a very convoluted kind of way promotes corruption.
If you're just joining us, ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the program 90 Minutes in Africa. We are broadcasting from Yaoundé, political capital of Cameroon in Central Africa. For those who are on Canal Plus, you can watch us on channel 309. You can also watch us on Amos 17 satellite. You can watch us on Swaycom. For those that are on Facebook, you can watch us on My Media Prime TV, and you can watch us on YouTube by typing BT Media Group. Our guest today is Senior Barrister Akere. He is an international lawyer, international governance expert, and a consultant for many African governments, heads of states, and even out of the continent. He is, first of all, talking about issues affecting his country, Cameroon, before we extend to handle other issues about our continent, Africa. That is why we have baptized the topic, How to Make Africa an El Dorado. We continue with Cameroon, Barrister Akere. Let's talk about what is happening in the country at a time where we seem to have observed that the government seems to be in camps, and there seems to be some sort of a battle. From what we are reading in newspapers and getting from analysts, there seems to be some sort of a battle. What do you think can be done by President Paul Biya to be able to ensure a smooth and a hitch-free transition someday when he will no longer be president of Cameroon?
I think that is a very important question that should be considered at this particular moment in our country. Because all about leading or governing a country is not about how you get to power, it's how you live. Because that's what people remember, and that's what determines how the future would be. So, the fact that the people from within are agitating betrays the fact that they're behaving as people who envisage that envisage the fact that we are coming towards the end of a regime. And this is manifesting itself in these different camps that we are seeing, and that is very bothersome. And from this, we can wind up with an implosion from within the camp, or an explosion from a country that is frightened for its future. So your question was, what should the president be? Do I think he should make it clear as to what happens if he happens not to be there. We should have a clear vision of how a transition works out. We never had it before since independence, be it of the Republic of Cameroon or the Federal Republic of Cameroon, 60 or 61, depending. We have never had a change of power by death or by elections. So that is what we are looking at. And I think the biggest task now would be to have people sit down and say, this is what should happen in either or the other scenario.
Senior Barrister, let's talk about the ongoing conflict in the northwest and southwest of Cameroon,
right,
especially by taking a look at the Canadian Dialogue Initiative, the denial of the Cameroon government, and the impact of this denial and this ping-pong on the peace process in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon.
I think that the Canadian initiative was laudable. I strongly believe that those who engaged the process were authorized to do so. You can call it what you want, mandate or no mandate, but they were authorized to do so. Because those who participated in the process did so under, the consent of the government. But I think there again, we are seeing the manifestations of the tension within the government. We all know that in this process, there are moderates and there are hawks. The moderates have gotten their way, and we're now heading towards what you're calling the Canadian process, which is going to happen thanks to the goodwill of the Canadian government. The moderates, the hawks, who apparently must have been excluded from the process, must have not taken this too lightly, and they went on the offensive. And I think it is their offensive that must have pushed us that way. And, now I'm just thinking like a lawyer, trying to put evidence together. There's something that struck me in that communique, is the last part of it, where he talks about thanking the United States for cooperating and hoping that other countries should emulate them by arresting, people who are terrorists and only have not. I don't have the exact language, but that's more or less what it said. My first question was, what does that part have to do with the other part? Congratulating the Americans and all that. Nothing. Consequently,
maybe telling the Canadian government to go the American way.
To arrest some people. I don't know about that. Or maybe it was for the consumption of the head of state. Somebody went and told the head of state. Maybe. Huh? Say, please, sir, look at the list of people arrested in America. These people are of groups that are sitting at the table in Canada. Don't you think that if you are discussing with them, you might slow down the Americans from arresting some more?
Maybe.
Maybe. And that is a powerful counterattack. Luckily for us, the American ambassador quickly tweeted to say their support for the president and all that. So I'm saying that what we saw in the Canadian process is again the tension between the two camps, I think.
Of recent, Senior Barrister, we've heard news about theft in some hidden budgetary lines, line 65, line 66, line 94, and so on and so forth. And then we also heard that Cameroon is some sort of going through a structural adjustment program in the IMF. And then just after that, prices of fuel were increased, and prices of taxi fare, transportation were also increased. What is the impact of this on Cameroon's economy? And as an expert, what is your suggestion to the Cameroon government?
Well, I'll just start with the last part. I think that the issue of the increasing of the price of fuel is a recurring issue in all African countries where fuel has been heavily subsidized. And that includes Cameroon. So Cameroon going through this restructuring process means that subsidizing the reduction of subsidy on oil products was on the books. So there's nothing you could do about that. But what is unfortunate is that at the same time, you have a recrudescence of corruption in the most blatant manner, where government funds are used to fuel the business of a single person. And nobody knows about this. And we know about it through a leak. Again, to the law I just said, that law also says that any subsidy to a private individual must be published and publicized. So the simple fact that all this was done off camera, with no information, and this obvious rise of corruption, which I'm afraid to say is systemic in our country now, coming after the problem with COVID gate as outlined by the audit bench, coming after the scandals of all the stadiums and it's a mix that makes it difficult for the citizen to accept the fact that how can these guys be putting all this weight on me at the same time that they are stealing? It makes it a very, very difficult atmosphere to manage for any government. So, first thing, we have to be decisive in fighting against corruption. We have to be transparent in what we do. If we don't do that, then all these measures can really cause the country to go towards a revolution. Because, you know, once you increase the price of fuel, increase the price of transportation, I mean, imagine a lady who used to go to Cotonou to buy material to come and sell here. She has to pay 40,000 more because of airport tax. If you're going further, if you're in business class, it's 120,000 francs more. So it is really a hard pill to swallow. I don't know how the government will manage it, but we are increasingly having a government which doesn't display itself as a body that has the plight of the poorest at heart. I keep quoting what the Pope said. He says that you understand the way government functions by the way it treats the poorest. And, you know, the sectors which I always say are important for every country are three. When I look at three sectors: justice, education, and health. How does the government manage these? And if you look at our country, you'll see it's a serious problem. These are sectors with problems. These are sectors with issues. And the only one question any government should ask itself when it launches a policy, simple: how does this benefit my people?
Senior Barrister, we are gradually leaving Cameroon to move to the Democratic Republic of Congo. But before we do that, I would like to understand, many people have been asking me this question because when you travel across Africa and you meet heads of state and other people, they will tell you Senior Barrister Akere Muna is one of the most sought experts when it comes to resolving governance issues. He is a sought expert when it comes to fighting corruption. You are received by heads of state who get your ideas on this particular aspect, but we don't understand why you are not using your knowledge to rescue your home country, Cameroon.
Well, dear brother, it's a real embarrassment because everywhere I go, I make a speech. In the DRS where I am, I give a lot of seminars, and not a single word one ends with asking me, but what about your country? I have never been asked. I can't impose myself. I did a whole when this Anglophone problem started. I don't like calling it Anglophone problem, but for the need of our conversation, I'll say so. I did a whole study on bilingualism, looking at the Canadian model. And the whole of that study was really leaning on a royal commission created in Canada when Quebec was complaining about domination. And the proportion of Québécois, the French-speaking Canadians, in the management of the state was very low compared to the proportion of their French-speaking population. That commission was put in place, and today in Quebec, the Québécois are over that proportion. I did the whole of that study, which I sent to the presidency. I don't want to boast, but that report triggered the creation of the Bilingual Commission. The records are there. So,
what's the tangible impact of the bilingualism
that what I'm trying to say was, it's when you make when you prescribe a drug, you should say what it's going to solve. Yes, there's a problem of marginalization in language, in education, culture, and all that, but nothing concretely is being done to address this. I think it's the way you framed the question the last time about the Anglophone problem, and I think that the simple problem there is the fact that what is being prescribed doesn't fit, is not appropriate to cure the disease.
Senior Barrister Akere, can we understand your specific role beside the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo? Apparently, you were caught up by him to try to see what you can do to help in the fight against corruption in that country. What is your specific role beside the
President? My specific role is that when I may have the meetings with the President, I say that I would rather be a consultant for the United Nations, UNDP, and then I can now have my services at the disposal of the government. So I am a consultant to UNDP, and concretely I have helped them to put in place the anti-corruption agency, the drafting of the documents and all to put that in order, and I advise them continually and advise them on the role, on what to do in the Glencore corruption scandal. You were talking about Cameroon. I did write a report to CONAC telling them about the Glencore case. The first letter, no answer. The second one, no answer. The third one, they wrote to me saying, "We thank you for your cooperation. Now we are going to open an investigation." But as we speak, I've never been called upon. If you make a complaint, the very first thing you do is to call the complainant and let him and ask him, "But what are you talking about here?" Nobody has ever called me, and I don't have the means of just strolling in here and start giving advice. What I'm considering is denouncing this and depositing a full file with the prosecutor in Douala, because that's where Glencore is, and the one in Limbe, because that's where Sonara is, and the one in Yaoundé, because this is where SNH has its head office.
Senior Barrister, you were a member of the high-level panel on illicit financial flows. How far has the panel gone in tackling corruption in Africa?
Great, that's a good question. I mean, I've had the amazing experience of working under the supervision of President Thabo Mbeki. This is a brilliant African. I mean, for somebody who has occupied such high position, he's really brilliant. And he enabled us to present, which he did present to the heads of state in 2015, a report on our work that took us all over the world to see what happens. Why is it that the amount of money Africa receives in foreign aid and assistance is 1/3 of what Africa loses in terms of illicit financial flows? we lose like 50 to 80 billion dollars a year leaving the continent. And so, logically, if you were to seal these leaks, the country will have more money at its disposal.
So have you guys succeeded in filling the leaks?
So firstly, you do a diagnosis, which we did in the report, and now we are on to implementation. One arm of implementation, and I chair that working group, is the CAPA project, which is the Commission on the Implementation of a Common African Policy on the repatriation of stolen assets. So that's what we're working on now, and to see how we can federate all the policies and make sure that in terms of asset repatriation, African countries can go in the same direction.
Senior Barrister, let's talk about the African Union and the role of the African Union in promoting African unity. That doesn't seem to be the case, because we are instead witnessing conflicts, we are witnessing coup d'etats, especially in West Africa. Why do you think the African Union is failing in their move towards consolidating African unity?
I think Africa has a problem of leadership now. You know, in the early 20s, 200s, you know, 201, 202, you know, when you talk about Africa, Thabo Mbeki, Abdoulaye Wade, Bouteflika, you know what I'm trying to say? You had Obasanjo, Meles, Zenawi. You had some figures that carry the continent. That's why we moved to an African Union. Of course, the towering figure of Gaddafi, he wanted to move very fast. But then that's when you had the peer review mechanism come into play. Then you had NEPAD. You had real strong structures put into place to galvanize the African unity. But we have now fallen back because we don't have the kind of strong leadership that can stand up to the West, and Western powerful interests still guide the behavior of African countries, which is sad, which is very, very sad. And the African Union will get weaker. It will get weaker as the fight for positions within the African Union will divide us. And as the starving, when I was president of the Economic and Social Council of the African Union, it was perceivable that the wranglings within the African Union itself run the risk of destroying the Union. Now we are beginning to see that. And I think what will save the situation, if we go back to the idea of building blocks. See, the regional economic communities, if they are strengthened, you know, the strongest one I used to think was the one of West Africa and SADC, but the coups you have mentioned again has gone to weaken, because you know that, of course, you have the West African Economic Union, but the question there is that you have Francophones and Anglophones. The Francophones are in majority, country-wise, but the Anglophones are in majority, population-wise.
Senior Barrister, we've seen the zeal, especially by younger leaders in Western Africa, their zeal to pick up positions of responsibility, and sometimes they get to use the most extreme ways, which is the coup d'etat. We have leaders who are 34 years old, 35 years old. They want to take over the future of to ensure that they are in positions where they can oversee the future of their countries. Maybe because they are disappointed with the older generation leaders. Do you encourage them towards this path?
Well, as the lawyer I am, I can't encourage unconstitutional forms of transition. But the fact remains that if you allow people with no other solution, what do you expect them to do? That is the situation. You can't back someone into a corner and he can't move, and you tell him, well, listen, you have to respect the law. So, and the debate is now rising because the African Union had charters on governance and all that, on constitutional forms of government and stuff like that. So the debate is rife. Are there certain coup d'etats in which people are almost forced into it? okay? What happened in Chad, you know, is that proper? And so when the Western forces come in to protect their interests, regardless of, you know, law and order, and then they scream foul and brandish governance and law and order when their interests are attacked, it makes the problem even more difficult to answer. So directly to your question, I don't think unconstitutional forms of government is the way out. I think that if the African Union can come into a position where its role is accepted in cases where leaders have developed a system of state capture and its own citizens are held in bondage and they can't express themselves, there's no hope for the youth, then there must be a way by which the institution might call its leaders to order. So that's most what I could say. We need to have a system where these people can be called to order in a regular manner. And those who are complaining about all these coup d'etats, if they install themselves in their countries in a manner as to making sure nothing else happens, well, you know, they can't complain about the outcome, no.
And when those coup d'etats are organized, Senior Barrister, we always discover that the regional blocs always go ahead to sometimes sanction the entire nation. Are you in favor, or do you support this kind of action by the regional blocs where an entire nation is sanctioned because of an action carried out by few individuals?
Well, you know, the international community speaks to people through its leaders. And you're raising the debate on whether sanctions help the people or not. In an insidious way, sanctions are really geared to making the people become ungovernable, to causing them to protest and reject what they are supporting, and therefore putting the leaders in peril. It's actually basically setting the people against their leaders. The problem with that is the fact that if you say yes, you might have regimes that come into power that are really, you know, unruly and reckless and brutal. If you say no, you come to the question, which is the way forward? So I think the sanctions should be limited to the kind of stuff that will make it difficult for the leaders, but not for its people. I'm against collective punishment. We have it all the time in the Northwest and Southwest. We had it I went to Kembong, you know, and where a whole village was razed down because of 3 gendarmes who were killed. I mean, the whole village was just destroyed. So this was collective punishment, which is practiced a lot. So I don't think so it's the way out. There must be a different way that causes the people to benefit. Do we have different vectors of aid through civil society and other friendly agencies to make sure that the people can still survive?
Senior Barrister, we've noticed, and sometimes many people are surprised, that a big organization like the African Union is unable to raise funds to fund itself. And we find a situation where the African Union is mostly funded by development agencies out of Africa, also by the European Union. What is the danger of this kind of way through which the African Union is being funded?
It's even an embarrassment. The headquarters of the African Union, sitting there in Addis, is built by the Chinese. That's what I'm saying. It's built by the Chinese. So what is the importance that African countries give to that organization? The Peace and Security Council of the African Union is largely funded from outside. We have looked at different modes of alternative financing, you know, a little tax on tickets, a little tax on this or that to fund the union, but they never come to an agreement. Somehow, I believe that these leaders don't really believe. In a very convoluted kind of way. I went to the AU many times. The president who spoke about the African Union, yes, from his own point of view of controlling, would believe he's Gaddafi. He put in his money. He was ready to get the common currency. He was ready to move to Pan-African institutions. So I'm saying again, it boils down to a question of leadership. And also, you know, people have the impression that once it becomes the AU, it's magical. The AU is peopled by people from the African countries. So if you take corrupt guys from Cameroon, Nigeria, or Botswana and put them in Addis, they don't just go through some kind of Calvary and change. They don't go through Damascus, you know, and suddenly become clean people. The attitudes they do in the country, I've seen it displaced there. So if the African countries are afraid that the AU is extravagant, some are mismanaged, that also can be a deterrent on corruption. There are few countries that really sustain the African Union. It used to be called the Big Seven at the time. I don't know how many still do that now. But that is something which is sad and shameful. I agree with you that, you know, if Africa cannot fund the organization that should bring them together and drive them towards a Pan-African Union, we don't have a chance.
And I also want to understand from you, I don't know whether it is also your opinion, the fact that the African Union seems to be a passive observer in happenings across the continent. Most of the time, we don't really, unless they're acting in the background and we don't see, but most of the time we have the impression that it is an organization that just operates on Twitter to condemn what is happening here without any tangible action.
From what we're seeing, acts only on the basis of the consent of the vis-a-vis. I mean, strong countries. If it's countries that are weak and have problems, then of course they'll make a lot of noise. So I think that it is a fact that the African Union, in its present form, now the reform that was made, you know, it went through a reform. It's unfortunate because it is showing great difficulty in application, you know. So I would agree with you that the African Union is a victim of the management of African and external African interests. It's a victim of it. And just to get the chairperson of the African Union, the kind of lobbying that goes on, that involves even non-African countries, is amazing. That's what I think.
Senior Barrister, the last time we were surprised when President Macky Sall of Senegal, alongside other African leaders, went to Ukraine, went to Russia, trying to negotiate to improve, that is to ensure that wheat is easily imported to Africa to help farming in the continent, something many people could not really understand, especially when we know that Africa has lots of fertile soil, hectares of fertile soil that have not been used for cultivation. And we keep on getting this attitude where African leaders take flights, they go to Paris to beg money from President Emmanuel Macron, who assembles them and then gives them money and so on. They are very, very happy. How can we really understand this gesture from African leaders that we have all we need in the continent? We bake bread, but we beg bread.
Well, I think that's very well put. The issue here is the fact that we are still struggling with the shackles of colonialism. In certain countries, those shackles are still very tight. And in other countries, those shackles have always been knocked off. Africa has a serious and huge governance problem, which is manifested through corruption. Africa does have a policy that fixes a minimum percentage of the budget that should be devoted to agriculture. And like you, I wonder why this problem of Ukraine is not seen as an opportunity to get intensive in terms of farming. It's unfortunate. Look at Gabon. You know, Gabon used to import palm oil, and that country went in and engaged with Olam International and Gabon now exports palm oil to Cameroon, just by simple policy. And many countries, Nigeria and others, they're really stimulating in internal production, which is a way of also protecting foreign exchange. So it beats me, while the Ukrainian problem shall not cause us to think. But you know, in Cameroon too, and many countries, people are getting very, very inventive in terms of what other flour you could use. It could be cassava, it could be, you know. So I think that we shouldn't just ignore that. But this is still initiatives by private citizens who are struggling to survive, to deliver goods, you know. So should Africa still be driven by foreign interests, be it Russian, American, French, or any other country?
Senior Barrister, what do you think can be done by our African governments to encourage the diaspora to invest in the continent? Because many of them want to invest in the continent, but most of the time there seem to be lots of bottlenecks.
Well, let me talk about our own country, because we have a huge diaspora, an expert diaspora, amazingly intelligent diaspora. In the DRC I'm consulting, I know at least 7 international agencies headed by Cameroonians. The World Bank, the head, the vice president of the World Bank, is a Cameroonian. So we do have the talents. But there's still simple things we could do. Dual nationality. And what does it cost our country to say, you know what? As from today, once a Cameroonian, always a Cameroonian. Till you personally, explicitly, in writing, renounce your Cameroonian nationality. You can have any other nationality you want, but once you're a Cameroonian, nobody can take that away from you. What happens? I can get up on a Friday, I say I'm going back home for a weekend. I don't have to start looking for a visa. I don't have to start getting a letter of invitation. I don't have to start showing that I have means of... It is crazy for a Cameroonian, because he's holding a French passport, to look for a letter of invitation to come to his own country. So I think this issue of dual nationality is a madness I cannot understand. It's something can be solved just like that, even overnight. Say that any Cameroonian by birth can come into the country. Is it money? Okay, we will levy you a fee of some kind of carte de séjour in a different category that any Cameroonian can buy and come to the country.
Maybe do you see this as a way to value our Cameroonian and African nationalities? Because if we keep on picking other nationalities, then finally at the end of the day, everyone will want to pick up another nationality. What do you think can be done?
I think it's the opposite. The fact that people are seeking other nationalities, it means that that has no value.
So it means we need to value our own nationality. What can
That's
we do
not
then?
the way to value it. The way we add value to our nationality is not by making it difficult for our own nationals to maintain their nationality. It's to make a country attractive for non-nationals to come to a country. So if you want to make our own nationality attractive, as they're doing in many West Indian countries now, with low population, if you go and invest $200,000 there, $200,000, they give you the nationality. They give you a passport. And that passport gives you access to all the Schengen countries and many others. So it is not the notion. What gives the value to a country is its attractiveness. And what reduces the value of our country is the fact that people are leaving. They're dying by the sea, daring through the desert. I think it is definitely not the way to give value to a country.
So how do you think the diaspora, the African diaspora, can handle this? Do you advise them to come together, then come back home to meet the African governments to explain to them that, okay...
So many countries are opening up. Ghana is opening up. I mean, the development in Ghana, they have financial issues now. It's because of the diasporans. I mean, why can't we, instead of waiting for mercy ships, I was speaking to some doctors in diaspora, why can't we put them in slots? I wrote a project, and I asked there to be a high-level meeting of the African diaspora, Cameroonian diaspora, where they will all be put in booths, and in their specificity and their technicalities, so that the country can tap on them. And that each time we have a contract going, for technicians or experts or consultants in any sector, 30% or some percentage of that procurement system is reserved for them. Nothing is done to encourage them to come. Nothing is done to encourage them to come. As a matter of fact, a lot is done to hinder them from coming. They are suspected of being, I don't know what, they are bullied, they are harassed, their life is made difficult, they are shaken, money is taken from them. So that's not the way to go. The way to go is to make them understand they have a role to play in the country.
So, Senior Barrister, what do you have to say about the fact that our African brothers and sisters, most of the time, they prefer to die in the Mediterranean Sea rather than stay back home? Just last night, when the president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, was making his speech, he, of course, mentioned in his speech that he is aware that many Cameroonian youths want to go out of their country. And some of them take this kind of sacrificial journey, as I call it. They are ready to take any kind of risk because they want to move out of the African countries. I mean, don't you think our African leaders should be ashamed of themselves when they see such images?
Not only them, I'm embarrassed when I see that happening. That's the country which is mine, the country I live in. I was just in the West Indies for some celebration, family celebration. And there were Cameroonians stranded who boarded a plane from Nigeria, supposedly because they would go to Antigua, and from there they would have a means of getting to the States. They were stranded. And it was all over the news. And unfortunately for them, at the same time, Antigua had its elections, and one party was saying that they were flown in to be used as voters. And you know, I was saying I'm Cameroonian, and there were Cameroonians with no food, no place to stay, refugees. How proud can you get? How embarrassed can you get? You know. And I keep saying, if those governors have this country and its honor and its people at heart, they should behave differently. And that's not what we're seeing.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, you're watching 90 Minutes in Africa. Today, my guest is international lawyer, consultant, and international governance expert, Barrister Akere Muna. He is my guest today on 90 Minutes in Africa. You can send in your observations or your questions or your suggestions to a senior barrister using the number you find on your screen, and we are going to forward them to him. You can watch us on Canal Satellite, channel 309. You can watch us on MS17. You can watch us on Swaycom Network, other local cable networks. On Facebook, we are on My Media Prime TV, and on YouTube, we are on BT Media Group. It is time for us now to tap from the knowledge of Senior Barrister when it comes to governance. Senior Barrister, I want to tap from your knowledge when it comes to governance. This is a rare privilege for us to do so. We have observed within, as the years unfold, that most of our African leaders are not very proactive. When things are happening in their countries, they don't really come out in a very proactive manner to show the impression that they can take charge of the situation at hand. But most of the time when things are happening out of Africa or out of their countries, if something happens in Paris, they are the first to tweet, "Je suis Charlie," and so on and so forth. So what happens? How can we understand the snail pace attitude of our African leaders when it comes to things that are happening just close to their nostrils?
I think, again, in the case of Cameroon, don't forget that in 60 years we have had just 2 presidents, okay? And I still believe that certain reflexes die hard. Certain reflexes die hard. Where people feel that they have to show allegiance to other forces, other countries. And that is the effect of that. That's the first thing. The second thing, which we mentioned, you talk about, generally speaking, this tendency of African leaders to appear to be hooked up to another leader, and for the foreign leaders to appear to have favorites on the continent, creates some kind of competition in certain behavior. You know, when you have an incident where people are killed in Paris, I agree with you, there's uproar. We can have an incident where people die, Ezeka or whatever. And, well, there's a whole lot of movement on the spur of the moment, and that's it. And that I really can't understand. If you love your country, if you're a leader of your country, the best way to connect with your people is in time of sorrow and grief. And that our leaders don't do that. Many do it. Many do it. You know, when I was in Ghana, the last time, you know, the president was going to the funeral of a well-known musician, and he was there. He was active. He decorated so that is it. But in our country, Cameroon, you know, we have developed a culture, or this aloofness, this gap, valley between those who govern and those who are governed, which is very unhealthy. More unhealthy, more so, especially when, you know, our country has evolved into a system where we're actually governed by civil servants, really. You know, in the 80s, 90s, the voices you heard were, you know, the Fundis, all those civil society people are political party leaders. But now, who call the shots? Civil servants. Look at the list of those going out to campaign in the regions. They're all civil servants.
So, Senior Barrister, let's talk about the need to have lawyers in positions of responsibility.
Yeah.
What is the importance of having lawyers in positions of responsibility, and what is the historical backing of their success?
Well, I think I would say that in the last speech I gave to the bar, I pushed hard on telling the lawyers that they should go out, become parliamentarians, become councillors, get engaged. Not only lawyers, doctors, journalists, people who know how the society functions. And journalists and lawyers, we have this thing of, we just had a conversation. We've touched medicine, we've touched economy, we've touched immigration, we've touched law. Because of our training, we are all encompassing. In most of the Anglophone countries, the Speaker of Parliament is invariably a lawyer. Because who is best to lead a legislating chamber than somebody who knows the law? I don't like quoting America, you know, but in America, out of 46 presidents, only 18 were not lawyers. Sometimes the president and the vice president, like now, were all lawyers, as it was in the time of Barack Obama. In America, about a third of I think the Senate are lawyers. About a half of Congress are lawyers. About a third of governors are lawyers. I think it's the nature of the beast. It's what you do. And in our system, well, civil servants are everywhere. They're in parastatals. They're just everywhere. They're in government. They run the party. They run parastatals. They run the whole economy. So, coming from the Congo, when you hear people talk about politics, the politicians, the party leaders, activists, that's all. It's really hard for you to find a situation where a political movement is driven by a full-time civil servant. That doesn't happen. But here, that's what's happening. So I feel that professionals, civil society members should get more active. They should. I mean, in the 90s, the structure understood that, and they sort of like absorbed a lot of these people. I have many friends who were activists in the 90s, went into government in Kenya. Actually, at that period, they used to say NGO meant next government official, you know, because they just got sucked into the system. So I think professionals from the civil society should have a better, much better outlook as to what should happen during elections. They should go there massively because they are trusted by their people. Go to your village, talk to them. I want to represent you because. If you want me to represent you, you have to register, you have to go and vote. And that's the way it should happen. I think That's the best chance we have. You know, otherwise, we will go on being on the menu and never be on the table.
But, Senior Barrister, that can only happen if they have confidence in the electoral system. If you are in an electoral system where one man's vote is more than 1 million votes, then they will not be encouraged to do
Well, what you're posing there, my dear friend, is the issue of the chicken and the egg. You know, is it by going in that system massively that you can change it, or by staying out and waiting for a change? I think that change is easily gotten when you are inside. I remember I had to do some work for Transparency International, and they were debating. They said, but you are the chair of the African peer review mechanism. How can you accept Equatorial Guinea to join the African peer review mechanism? I said, you guys are wrong. If you leave him out, he will never join. He will never change. If you bring him in, he has to go through the peer review. We have benchmarks. He has to conform. Then you have a chance. So I think that if you move in there massively and you are able to get the people with you, it's going to be more difficult to do what you're talking about.
Senior Barrister, let's talk about something we have observed for some time now, where most leaders in Africa, especially in Central Africa, keep finding it difficult to hand over the relay baton to the person who is supposed to take over. Can we say this is some sort of a gene as Bantus, whereby it is difficult for people to just leave power like that? And can we say that it is time for us to start reflecting about a specific democracy for the African continent? I don't know how to call it, whether democracy or African, I don't know which word to use.
Well, that question is a pertinent question because it really affects the livelihood of the ordinary citizen. I think it depends on the quality of leaders that we elect. Okay. If Mandela decides that, although he has a second mandate to go through, but the first mandate is good enough. If the president of Niger, who was pushed to try and change the constitution, says no, there are many other people from Niger who can do this, I'm leaving. So, excuse me, I think, therefore, that it depends on the belief of the leadership on the democratic process. Granted, democracy, Western style, might not be workable in other countries. There are just adjustments to do because of the way we think. For example, in a transitional government, you need to have, for example, when I had a meeting with the president of the DRC, and we're talking about corruption, he said, on ne va pas aller chercher dans les tiroirs. Okay, he says that, you know, that's thinking about some kind of amnesty, some kind of soft approach to those who were there before. Because, you know, the more you frighten those who were there before, the more you guarantee the fact that they will sit tight. And that's what we're having in Cameroon now. The level of embezzlement and thievery that has gone on makes the guys to dread change. He says, man, if somebody else comes, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Well, let me just tell you a short anecdote. My father was alive then. I drove to the village, you know, to visit him over the weekend, and I walked in. It was like 9 p.m., you know. And he said, Akere? I said, yes, Papa. He says, man, SDS, huh? You guys have a party there. It's moving, the crowds are everywhere and all that. You might just win. I said, Papa, the way it's going, I think we'll win. Then he looked at me and says, if you win, how do you take power? If you win the elections, how do you take power? I stared at him with my mouth wide open. He says, okay, let's talk about it in the morning. I said, went to bed, I took my cab, rushed to Bamenda, Club 58, I met Sensei, I met Justice Nyowakai. I said, he says, Akere, are you here? I said, I'm here. He said, well, I said, Papa, just ask me a question. See, if you win the elections, how do you take power? He said, Nsah, you know, the old man is from a different area. You win, you win. I said, okay. Got in my car, drove back to the village. 8 o'clock in the morning, my father kicked my door for breakfast. And I got up, went for breakfast. He said, my question remains. If you win the elections, how do you take power? I said, Papa, if you win, He says, no, you guys, you're condemning the gendarmes, insulting the French, you're using their money, threatening the prefects, cursing out the Betis. Every person who is anchored in the institution today, boycotting French goods, having a language which is hostile to those who are in power. So what do you expect? When you should be telling them that their life will be better, you could make things better, this is what you can do to make life better, you're telling them how they're going to see. Of course.
But even if you tell them that their life is going to be better, do you think that is going to they are not going to trust you? Because, of course, you have of the opposition.
Whereby
they are still not going to
the proof of the proof is eating. Even with that atmosphere, according to the government, Fruity lost by 3 points, 3 or 4 points. Okay? I think from my own tallying that they won. Okay? So, even with that, and that also tells you something. The Anglophones are a minority in this country, let's say 20%. Then how come Fruity was getting about almost 37 or 38%? It means that at that time in '92, this country was in a different place in terms of unity and stuff like that, and Anglophone, Francophone. We must have it in a unity in a different place. And people were ready to vote for a unilingual Cameroonian that they had never known anything about before. So, to land on the question you're asking, I strongly believe that the way things look, any kind of citizens' mobilization will trump any kind of insidious plan to rig elections. And the time when this happens in most African countries, from my experience, is at a time of transition, when you're going from one president to the next. The institutions feel released. They feel they can go according to the law. And that is what I hope for my country.
Senior Barrister, that brings us to the question of how to prevent the divisions of our African continent through imported languages. Mm-hmm. Because we keep seeing fights and conflicts because of languages, Francophone, Anglophone, and so on and so forth. Don't you think it is time for us in Africa to start valorizing our languages? If, for instance, in a country like Cameroon and other countries where there seem to be conflict because of language-related difficulties, if they decide to choose maybe a local national language, don't you think we are going to stop having these kind of situations or scenarios?
I think language is a tool for communication. It's not a fanciful product. Tanzania learned that, Nyerere learned that at a cost in his country when he pushed for Swahili to be used. But if you go to Tanzania, there's a generation of people whose English is almost inexistent. Because at the time they went to school, all they were taught in was in Swahili. So you have to take that decision. And this tension about languages is not only an African factor. In Belgium, you have it. In France, you have it. The French complain about it all the time at the United Nations about dominance of the Anglo-Saxon language. But the Germans were smarter in our country. When I was in school, when I was in Bamenda, in the Northwest, Bamenda region it was called then, Bamenda division it was called. We learned Bali in school. Then my father was transferred to Boya. We learned Douala in school. I think around here in the center it was either Ewondo or Bulu. In the north it was Fulbe, and in the western province I think it was the Bafang, or I think it's Fefe language that was. You see, the Germans had divided the country into 5 language zones. And I am a partisan of the fact that we should immediately, within our countries, already start looking. The African Union has gone a bit further by making Swahili one of the languages. And I think it will be easier for us to adopt progressively as a national language, one that is not one of ours. While we can push the regional development of our own languages, it will be great if we started learning Swahili as what will become the lingua franca of the continent. I agree with you that, you know, if we don't have our own language, we will always have a truncated identity.
Senior Barrister, one of the things I admire about you is your name,
Yeah.
Barrister Akere.
Yeah.
This is purely African.
Yeah.
And I mean, it brings us to what many people have been talking about, the fact that having European names still gives us the impression that we are colonized, because you cannot be decolonized and you are still bearing someone's name. And I've never really known your English name. Is it that it does not exist, or you deliberately decided to put your African name at the forefront?
My father decided from his 5th child not to give any European
English
names.
name.
Yeah, English name, as they used to call it then. It was called the English name. So my brother Walinjom Fombad Muna. Then my father went to University of London to study. And my brother George was born. And somebody who was around gave the name George. But afterwards, you'll have me, Akere Tabe Muna, and my sister Ama. So my father thought that this is crazy. Why should we be having those names? Okay, so, and the thing about African names is that they come with a background. Well, why am I called Akere? I'm called Akere because in my language it means who knows. Okay, when I was born, as the 7th child, everybody thought I was going to be born a girl because there were 6 boys already. So I was born Akere, which means God alone knows, who knows. So I can explain my name, and that's the pride of my name. So you might have a name that has to do with whether they are twins, or because it's the name of your father, or my daughter's name is Candy, which is Kandi, which is the grandmother of Ndi, which was a sister now of my father's brother, or my father's father. So I think I agree with you that the naming, which is something Mobutu tried to do, but in a very crude manner, this changing of names. But you know, okay, if you want to be a Christian, why can't you be baptized with your own name? I think these are vestiges of colonialism that people should be made aware of.
And when you were baptized, I don't know where do you work fellowship? Is it Presbyterian?
Presbyterian. I was baptized and confirmed by. I was confirmed by Reverend Canton, the late moderator. I was baptized with my name, Akere Tabe Muna.
Did he impose?
No. Nobody imposed any kind of name on us. There's no thing that forces to have an English name. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, I used to be very embarrassed. When I said my name is Akere, I said, what is your English name? I would probably lie when I say Ben or anything like that. But I felt embarrassed, and that's how bad it is.
But as you travel across Africa, especially in Europe and America, have you met some people who appreciate your name, Akere Muna?
Oh, I have so many people who have given the name to their children just because they thought, you know. Let me tell you this story. When I was going to school in the States, my brother George and I used to drive to a gas station. And the guy said, well, you're African? My brother George would say, yes. And my brother George asked the guy will ask my brother George, what's your name? He says, George. The guy said, come on, man. What is your African name? What do you mean, George? He says, my name is George Muna. He says, nah. Came in one day, he says, man, don't bullshit me. What is your name? And George just looked at me and went, Shokoloko Bango She. And the guy said, that's the name. And from that day, he called my brother George Shokoloko. You know, it tells you what it is. I mean, I think that people do appreciate. People there, Americans are struggling. They're getting names that are African. You know, they're doing stuff. You know, they're thirsting for this. But here we are. You know, some even have Scottish names with Mark this and Mark that. I don't know where it's coming from. But you know, I think the awareness should be put in place, but the choice should be that of the individual.
Senior Barrister Akere Muna, we are getting towards the end of this interview. But just to know from you, as someone who studied out of Africa, you studied in Western universities, some of the best, and a very brilliant lawyer at the time, and you are still today. Probably you could have picked up a job in a very big legal firm there in the United States or any other country in Europe. You have the competence and you are recognized, but you decided to come back home.
It's a brilliant question.
So why did you come back home, and what can other Africans in the diaspora learn from your decision to come back home?
Well, It's a brilliant question because there's a story behind it. If I tell you I came back home because of some burning patriotism, I'll be lying. Straight lying to you. But I'll tell you the secret to my own story. I'll share with you. I haven't shared it before. So, I was in the group of barristers in the UK that came out, the first group. I was called to the bar in England in '78. The UK entered then was called the EEC, the European Economic Community. They entered in there in 1975. So we were the first set of barristers who had started EEC law. So when I graduated as a barrister in '78, we were the few first barristers trained in EEC law. I have more or less a bilingual angle to my training. So I could pick up a job like this in Brussels, in the ACP EC Commission, but I was prime cut. So I called my father. I said, well, here it is. I've been called to the bar. They're great offers in Belgium, Brussels, this, that, and the other. He says, Brussels what? He says, man, you pack your bags and come home. This is where it's happening. There's no point for you to go and fix other people's country. Come and fix yours so the people to come to your country. So that's why I think he wouldn't even ask me to come and work with the country, to come and work with the government. He was asking me to come and work with my brother Bernard. And that's what I did. So it's a question of choice and also a question of possibility. You know, it was able for me to come and work with my brother, but if somebody comes, many people have come back home with financial means to try and start up, and they have been swindled, stolen, and they have just packed their stuff and gone back. So it is a difficult question. I'm sure you've met many of our brothers from the American diaspora who spend a lot of money to try and invest and make things work. But yet, they don't have that extra push from the country that shows that, here's a son of ours who has come to help.
But Barrister, apart from the country, sometimes they face difficulties related to dishonesty by some of those they trust home.
True, true. And I can tell you a quick story about that. There's a gentleman who married a French lady, and he had his father. And he was sending money to the father and to build a house. The father was showing the pictures and everything was okay. And he was from the Francophone side. And what he did was bought a car, which he sent. And he sent furniture and everything. He was married to a French lady. He already had 2 or 3 kids. So he planned to come on vacation now and go to the house. So he came, got a vehicle, drove. He didn't see his father. He was a bit worried. He drove to the village and saw the house he had on the picture. So he went there and was asking around, but where is that? I need the keys. The guy said, of what? He said, it's always that house doesn't belong to you. It belongs to a so-and-so person. That is your plot there. Nothing was on it. So all he sent the father had spent, and the guy just packed from where he was with his kids, came back to the Hilton, changed the date of his ticket, and flew back to France. Never came back.
Senior Barrister Akere, thank you so much for coming. I think it's time for us to get, your advice to African youths who are struggling, who are going through difficulties. Some of them have tried to go to Europe, but they were repatriated. They don't know what to do. They don't have capital to start businesses. They don't have anyone to look up to. Their leaders are failing them. What advice do you have for them?
Well, advice at 2 levels. Firstly, the dawn, the darkest point is always the hour before dawn. They shouldn't lose hope because this country has amazing wealth. They should try to do stuff together. And I'm doing my part. I created the Now movement, you know very well, which has to do with youth. We restructured it, and we are now going around. We're going to launch a project called the budget tracking, where they will be in different regions and look at what the government actually spend, what it says is spending. So I think the youth have to stick together and try to do stuff together. Yeah, try to do stuff together. And I think any political movement or party that is seeking to take power or to replace the present regime has to understand that the best bet we have is the youth. It's the best bet. It's the best bet. And you have to do that by empowering them. You should have systems. It's okay to say, go and do agriculture. But you say, okay, the most industrious youth, will take them and sponsor them. Look at the ingenuity of African youth, Cameroonian youth in terms of IT. Sometimes all of us see those videos of a young guy in the street, you know, with electronic toys and things are functioning. Who picks them up? Do we have a system that congratulates and elevates excellence? Do we have a system where they will say, oh, this year this is the best guy who has done this? So I think these are things that we could do to give traction to a cause for excellence and to a cause that leads us to a better and an exciting country.
And before we leave you, Senior Barrister, are your presidential ambitions still intact? As Akere said, maybe things are very, very difficult in his home country, Cameroon. It's just good to leave the politics and focus on his career, or you're still focused on becoming, ruling Cameroon someday?
Well, my ambition to launch a candidacy in 2018 was not just because I wanted to become president. Oh no. It was launched as a continuation. Because people forget that from the 90s, I was already talking about anti-corruption and governance. You know, I created a local chapter of Transparency International. I went to the National Council of TI, and finally I became vice president and became head of the International Anti-Corruption Council. I've done this. And you asked me the question, what about your country? So I just said, well, listen, I've learned so much that maybe I should be in a position to share with it. So yes, I'm in that position to still want to share. And I think in the transition posture which we have in our country now, it's more getting the opposition together and understanding that together is the way we can effect change. So I'm more concentrated on getting that process together. And if it is the wish that whoever is chosen to lead, I will support that. I said that in 2008, and I'm saying the same thing now. So I'm not focused and say, wow, in 2025, I'm going to run. That's not my worry. My worry now is, what is the systemic thing to do to make sure that we can go through a peaceful transition?
And if the president of your home country, Paul Biya, says, oh, Barrister Akere, I have seen what you are doing, but sincerely speaking, you cannot do much in the opposition. Come and join me. Let us see how together we can build Cameroon. Are you going to refuse that offer from the head of state? Well,
you have refused to enter government 2 or 3 times already, so early 2020. So I don't think that you can only help your country because you have a position. No. I've done so many things all over the world, and I think that there's a lot one can do from different areas. I think that your media, when I see what you're doing, your bouquet, it's fantastic. You're contributing at great strain to development of the thinking process. I have a medium to share with Cameroonians what I think. They can contact me, we can talk. So I think that there are many ways of contributing to the country. But we have reduced everything in this country to position. You stop someone and the first thing, ask you, do you know who I am? So that is it. I don't care who you are. I care from what country you're coming from, and what your country is doing, and what your government is doing for its people. So I think, I want our country to be able to go to a peaceful process of transition, and I'm willing to contribute to that. And that is my preoccupation for the moment.
Senior Barrister Akere, I want to thank you so much for coming. Your last words to viewers of My Media Prime TV, this rising TV with a higher percentage of content in English. Your last word to them? Well,
my last word is that the youth of our country should to learn from your project. You don't wait for anybody to give you heavy loans. You're innovative, and you have sought to make your mark, and that you have done. And I think that if some people should have benefited from line 94, maybe you should have. Maybe you didn't have the right phone number, but there you are. And I think that our country will gain from helping those who not only help themselves, but help the country to improve. So tell them, I say, well, learn from Prime TV.
Thank you, Barrister Akere Muna. Ladies and gentlemen, it is on that note that we draw the curtains for today's edition of the program 90 Minutes in Africa. Our guest today was Senior Barrister Akere Muna. He is an international lawyer, international consultant, and governance expert, and also a politician. Special thanks to Romuald Ngatsa, who was our producer for the day. Special thanks to our relay production team in Douala, Christian Tebong, Eli, Ewane, and Nolinga. The program was coordinated by Kum Leonard and supervised by Brian Tambe. I am Boh Elvis at the microphone, thanking you for watching. Have a wonderful day in the company of my Media Prime programs.
Welcome to a new world of TV broadcasting. My Media Prime. News, discovery, culture. Join us. My Media Prime. The African Eye.
Believe that Jesus Christ is the band man.
Run the comedy for so long. I'm not gonna fight.
Je lui dis grand problème. Je m'en vais à Lille, mais je ne parle pas l'anglais.
For so long, I'm not gonna fight.